Ex-husband faces shocking revelation from ex-wife. Will this twist break their fragile peace? Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main characters. Sarah and Tom had always been a couple that many admired. From their early days together, it was clear that they were a match made in heaven. They shared everything, dreams, hopes, and even fears. But like many things in life, things began to fall apart. They tried to make it work, tried to ignore the cracks that started to show. But ultimately, their marriage came to an end, leaving both of them broken in their own ways. Sarah, a strong woman with a soft heart, found herself struggling to move on. Tom, on the other hand, threw himself into work, trying to avoid facing the emotions that came with the end of their relationship. Their divorce was anything but peaceful. There were moments of silence, followed by sharp words, each one carrying the weight of unresolved feelings. They agreed to remain civil, at least for the sake of their shared past. But deep down, neither of them had truly healed from the wounds they'd caused each other. Months passed, and both Sarah and Tom settled into their new lives. They saw each other occasionally, at events or mutual friends' gatherings, always exchanging polite smiles but never going deeper. It was as if they were strangers passing in the night, each unsure of what to say or how to act around the other. But everything was about to change. It all started one evening, when Sarah reached out to Tom. She had something important to tell him, something she couldn't carry any longer. Tom, confused and curious, agreed to meet her. Little did he know, the revelation Sarah was about to share would shatter the fragile peace they had built over time. As they sat in a quiet cafe, Sarah took a deep breath. Her hands trembled slightly as she looked Tom in the eyes, wondering if she was making the right decision. "There's something I've never told you, something I should have said a long time ago," she began. Tom leaned in, his interest piqued. Sarah paused, her mind racing, trying to find the right words. The silence hung between them, thick and heavy, until she finally spoke again. "The real reason we ended things wasn't just because we grew apart. There was something I found out, something that changed everything for me." Tom's face hardened, his expression turning from curiosity to concern. "What are you talking about, Sarah?" he asked, his voice laced with both suspicion and confusion. She hesitated, then lowered her voice. "I found out about the affair, Tom. The one you had, with her." Tom felt the world tilt beneath him. His heart raced, his breath caught in his throat. The secret he had buried deep for so long had just resurfaced. He had never thought Sarah knew. He had kept it hidden, believing that no one would ever find out. But here it was, the truth, right in front of him. Sarah's words echoed in his mind, each one cutting deeper than he ever imagined. His mind raced, trying to process what she had just revealed. The peace he had thought was fragile now felt like it was completely shattered. The world he had built, one of denial and suppression, was collapsing around him. He stared at Sarah, his eyes filled with a mixture of regret, guilt, and disbelief. She had known all along. And now, she had finally brought it to light. "Why didn't you say something sooner?" Tom whispered, his voice barely audible. Sarah shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. "I didn't want to hurt you, Tom. But I couldn't keep pretending anymore. I couldn't pretend that I didn't know." The weight of her words hung heavy in the air, and for the first time in a long while, both Sarah and Tom were forced to face the truth, the painful truth that had always been just beneath the surface. As Tom sat there, his mind struggled to process Sarah's revelation. The quiet hum of the cafe around them seemed to fade into the background as his thoughts raced. He had never expected this. His heart pounded in his chest as the weight of Sarah's words sank in. He had always assumed the past was buried, locked away, something neither of them would ever speak of again. But now, here it was, dragged out into the open, and the truth was undeniable. He could see the pain in Sarah's eyes, the years of hurt she had carried all this time, and he could no longer deny it. His secret was no longer his own. It belonged to her now, and he could see the damage it had done. He wanted to say something, to explain, but the words wouldn't come. How could he explain something that even he couldn't fully understand? Sarah had been the love of his life, and yet he had betrayed her in the worst way possible. And now, as the silence stretched between them, he could only feel the weight of his guilt pressing down on him. Sarah, still staring at him, waited for a response, her face a mixture of anger and sadness. She had been holding on to this secret for so long, and now that it was out, she wasn't sure what she expected from him. She wasn't even sure what she wanted. Part of her just wanted him to apologize, to acknowledge the pain he had caused, but the other part of her didn't know if that would ever be enough. Nothing could undo the years of hurt, the broken trust, the emotional toll it had taken on her. She had moved on, or so she thought, but now it felt like the past had come back to haunt her, dragging her into a whirlwind of emotions she wasn't sure she was ready to face again. Tom finally found his voice, though it was soft, filled with regret. "I'm sorry," he said, his words barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry for everything. For the lies, for the betrayal, for not being the man you needed me to be." His words hung in the air, but they didn't feel like enough. They couldn't possibly undo the damage he had caused. Sarah shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes once more. "You can't take it back, Tom. You can't just say sorry and expect it to fix everything. You've broken something that can never be repaired." Tom's heart sank as her words hit him like a punch to the gut. He had always known there was a cost to his actions, but hearing it from Sarah, seeing the hurt in her eyes, made it feel like a weight he would carry for the rest of his life. He had lost her once, and now, in this moment, he could feel it slipping further away. "I know," he whispered, his voice heavy with the weight of truth. "I know I can't fix it. I don't expect you to forgive me, Sarah. I just needed you to know the truth. I never wanted to hurt you." Sarah took a deep breath, her hands trembling as she wiped away the tears that had begun to fall. She looked away from Tom, trying to gather her thoughts. She had spent so long trying to move forward, to build a life without him, but now everything felt like it was unraveling. She had to ask herself, though, if she had really moved on, or if she had simply buried the pain deep inside, pretending it didn't matter. The truth was, it did matter. It always had. The betrayal, the lies, the broken promises. They had left scars, ones that were never fully healed. "I don't know what to say," she finally said, her voice shaky. "I don't know if I can ever look at you the same way again." Tom sat there, completely defeated. He had never felt so helpless. His whole life had been about running away from the consequences of his actions, but now, in the face of Sarah's pain, there was no escaping it. He had to face the truth. The truth that he had hurt the one person he had loved more than anything. And now, he didn't know if there was any way to make things right. Tom sat silently, his mind still reeling from the conversation with Sarah. The words she had spoken echoed in his head, each one a reminder of the trust he had broken. He could feel the weight of his guilt crushing him, but at the same time, he couldn't deny that a part of him was relieved. For years, he had carried the secret of his betrayal like a heavy burden, and now that it was out in the open, he didn't have to hide anymore. But that relief was fleeting, quickly overshadowed by the realization of what he had done. He had destroyed something that had once been beautiful, and no apology could ever fix it. He watched as Sarah wiped away her tears, her face a mixture of sorrow and confusion. He knew she was struggling with the same questions he had been asking himself for months. Could they ever move forward from this? Could there be any chance of redemption? The silence between them was deafening. Neither of them knew what to say next. Tom longed to reach out, to somehow comfort her, but he knew it was too late for that. He had lost the right to offer comfort when he had made the choices he did. The betrayal was too deep, and the pain too fresh. Sarah finally spoke, her voice soft but steady. "I've spent so long trying to convince myself that it didn't matter, that I was over it. But I was lying to myself, wasn't I? She looked at Tom, her eyes filled with both sadness and resignation. I've been pretending that I was okay, that I could let go of everything. But the truth is I can't. I still feel the sting of it. I still feel the hurt. Tom's heart ached at her words. He had known that the betrayal would leave scars, but hearing her say it out loud made the reality of it all hit him harder than he ever imagined. I never meant to hurt you, Sarah, he said, his voice filled with regret. I don't know what I was thinking. I thought I could handle everything, that I could keep everything under control, but I was wrong. I was selfish, and I hurt you in the worst way possible. Sarah shook her head, her expression unreadable. You can't take it back, Tom. You can't undo what you did. And I don't know if I can ever forgive you for it. Tom closed his eyes, the weight of her words settling heavily on his chest. He knew she was right. He couldn't undo the past. He had made choices that had irrevocably changed the course of their lives. He had hurt her in a way that no apology could ever fix. And now, he was left wondering if there was any way to make things right, or if their relationship was beyond repair. The silence stretched on, either of them willing to break it. For a moment, they both just sat there, the enormity of the situation sinking in. Tom couldn't help but think about everything they had been through together, the good times, the laughter, the dreams they had shared. It all felt so far away now, like a distant memory that he could never reach again. He had lost her once, and now it seemed like he had lost her for good. But despite everything, despite the pain and the regret, there was still a part of him that wasn't ready to give up. He wasn't ready to let go of the hope that somehow, they could rebuild what they had lost. Sarah, too, seemed to be caught in a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. She had been the one to speak the truth, but now she wasn't sure what to do with it. She had felt so certain that the past was behind her, but now it felt like it was all coming back, flooding her with emotions she hadn't known she still had. She looked at Tom, and for a brief moment she saw the man she once loved, the man she had trusted, the man she had believed in. But that man was gone, replaced by a stranger. She wasn't sure if she could ever see him the same way again. And yet there was still a part of her that wanted to believe in the possibility of healing, of forgiveness, even if that seemed impossible. I don't know what to do, Tom, Sarah finally said, her voice barely a whisper. I don't know if I can forgive you. But I can't keep pretending that I don't care either. Tom looked at her, his heart heavy with both hope and fear. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for sure: their story wasn't over yet. Not if he had anything to say about it. As the minutes passed in that small, quiet cafe, the weight of the conversation hung between Sarah and Tom like an invisible force. Neither of them knew how to move forward, nor did they know if they even wanted to. The raw honesty they had just shared seemed to open a door either of them was prepared to walk through. Sarah, still lost in the whirlwind of emotions, struggled with the silence. It had been years since she had felt so exposed, so vulnerable. She had thought she had built a new life, a life where the pain of the past would stay buried. But now, in this moment, it was all rushing back, and the walls she had so carefully built were crumbling. She had been right about one thing: she hadn't truly moved on. The pain still lingered deep within her, hidden beneath the surface. And now, with Tom sitting across from her, it felt like everything had come rushing back to the surface. Tom, on the other hand, was consumed with guilt. He wanted to fix things. He wanted to undo the hurt he had caused. But deep down, he knew he couldn't. No amount of apologies could erase the past, and no words could heal the damage that had been done. He had betrayed her, and the consequences of his actions had become impossible to ignore. The truth was out, and it had shattered their fragile peace. He looked at Sarah, wondering if there was any way to bridge the gap between them. He wasn't sure if it was even possible. I don't know what to say, Sarah whispered, her voice breaking the silence. I don't know if I can ever look at you the same way again. Her words cut through Tom like a knife. He had known it wouldn't be easy, but hearing those words made him realize just how far he had fallen. He had hoped for a miracle, some way to fix what he had broken, But now he was starting to face the harsh reality that perhaps there was no way back. "I understand," Tom replied softly, his voice tinged with regret. "I don't expect you to forgive me, Sarah. I don't expect things to go back to the way they were. But I just want you to know that I am truly sorry for what I did." Sarah nodded slowly, her eyes downcast. She wasn't sure what she was expecting from him. A grand gesture, an explanation, or maybe just time to make sense of everything. But all she got was his apology, and it felt like both too little and too much. She didn't know what she wanted from him anymore. She didn't know if forgiveness was even possible. "I can't keep doing this," Sarah said after a long pause, her voice steady but filled with pain. "I can't keep pretending that everything is okay. I thought I was okay, but I'm not. I can't keep carrying this hurt around with me." Tom reached out, his hand hovering in the air for a moment before he lowered it, unsure if Sarah would want his comfort. "What do you want, Sarah?" he asked quietly. "What can I do to make this right?" Sarah took a deep breath, her mind a jumble of conflicting emotions. She wanted to let go of the anger, the hurt, and the betrayal, but she wasn't sure if she could. The past had left its mark on her, and the road to healing seemed so uncertain. "I don't know," she replied softly, almost to herself. "I need time, Tom. Time to figure out if I can ever look at you the same way again, if I can ever forgive you for what you did." Tom nodded, understanding the weight of her words. He had no right to rush her, no right to expect her to forgive him. He had lost that right when he had made the choices he did. "Take all the time you need," he said, his voice filled with sincerity. "I'll be here when you're ready. I just hope that someday you can find it in your heart to forgive me." Sarah didn't answer him right away. Instead, she sat back in her chair, her mind swirling with all the thoughts and emotions she had been avoiding for so long. For the first time in a long while, she wasn't sure where her life was headed. She wasn't sure if she could ever truly forgive Tom, but one thing was clear: the past was far from over, and their journey, whatever it might look like, was far from finished. The days that followed the conversation at the cafe were filled with uncertainty and reflection. Both Sarah and Tom were left to grapple with the weight of their words and the tangled emotions that followed. Sarah, who had always prided herself on her strength, found herself questioning everything. The closure she thought she had achieved from their past now seemed like a distant dream, shattered by the truth that had come to light. Every moment she spent trying to move on now felt like she was walking in circles, stuck in a place where the past and present collided in a way she couldn't escape. She went about her daily routine, but her mind was never fully present. At work, with friends, and even in the quiet of her home, she couldn't shake the thought of what Tom had done. The betrayal was still fresh in her mind, and though she longed for peace, she knew it would take time to heal. The nights were the hardest. She would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the conversations in her head. Had she made the right decision? Could she really move on from him? Could she find a way to forgive him? Questions flooded her mind, but the answers were elusive. Tom, too, spent his days lost in his own thoughts. He had never imagined the weight of guilt would feel so heavy. Every moment without Sarah felt like an eternity. He had hoped that time would heal things, that distance would somehow allow them to move past the pain. But he knew now that healing was not something that could be rushed. The hurt he had caused was deep, and he had no way of knowing how long it would take for Sarah to even begin to trust him again. He tried to distract himself with work, throwing himself into projects to avoid facing the uncomfortable reality of his situation. But even in the busiest moments, the thought of Sarah, her face filled with hurt, was always there. He knew he couldn't undo the past, but he hoped that somehow, someday, she would find it in her heart to forgive him. Days turned into weeks, and the space between them remained filled with tension. There were no confrontations, no heated arguments. Just silence. Sarah kept her distance, and Tom respected it, knowing that anything he said or did would likely make things worse. Yet, despite the silence, a part of him still hoped. He wondered if this time apart might allow them both to find the answers they needed. One evening, after another long day, Sarah decided to reach out. She had been thinking about Tom more than she cared to admit. The frustration and sadness she felt were still there, but so was the part of her that had once loved him deeply. She wasn't sure if she was ready to open that door again, but she knew she had to at least try. It wasn't about forgiving him yet, it wasn't about rekindling their relationship immediately. It was about taking the first step, about finding a way to address the unresolved emotions that had been left hanging in the air between them. She picked up her phone and typed a simple message. "Can we meet again? I think we need to talk." She hesitated for a moment before pressing send, not sure what to expect in return. It felt like an impossible step, but it was the only step she could take. Tom's response came a few moments later, and when she saw it, a wave of relief washed over her. "I'll be there," it said. Sarah took a deep breath and stared at the message. She had no idea what would come of this meeting, but she knew it was necessary. The silence had gone on long enough, and it was time for them both to face the reality of their situation. She didn't know if they could fix everything, but she knew they had to start somewhere. And that somewhere was now. The following day, Sarah found herself standing in front of the cafe, the same place where their conversation had taken a turn she never expected. She wasn't sure what to expect from this meeting. After all the silence, after all the time spent apart, she had no idea if this would help heal anything or if it would just add more pain to an already complicated situation. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision she had just made. She had reached out, and now she was here, waiting for Tom. Her phone buzzed in her hand, and she saw the message from him. "I'm here," it said. A part of her had hoped that maybe he wouldn't show up, that maybe this moment would never happen, but now that it had, she felt both relieved and anxious. She stepped inside the cafe and saw him right away. Tom was sitting by the window, his posture stiff, his eyes focused on the table. He didn't see her at first, and she hesitated for a moment, unsure if she should walk over or wait for him to notice her. After a few seconds, Tom looked up, and their eyes met. For a brief moment, it felt like nothing had changed. There was that familiar look in his eyes, the one she had seen so many times before. The one that reminded her of everything they had once shared. But then the reality of the situation hit her again. He wasn't the man she had fallen in love with anymore. Not the same man who had been so full of promise, so full of trust. The man sitting across from her now was someone who had hurt her deeply. She walked over and sat down, the silence between them heavy. Tom opened his mouth to speak, but Sarah held up her hand, stopping him. "I don't know what you're expecting from this," she said softly, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you for what you did. But I needed to see you. I needed to talk to you." Tom nodded, understanding the weight of her words. He had no illusions about where things stood. He had no right to expect forgiveness or even understanding. He had betrayed her, and now he had to face whatever consequences came with it. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he said quietly. "I don't expect anything from you. I just wanted to be here. I wanted to show you that I'm sorry. That I regret what I did every day." Sarah looked at him, searching his face for any sign of the man she once knew. He was still the same, in some ways. He still had that same earnest expression, the same warmth in his eyes. But that warmth was now laced with guilt, and Sarah couldn't ignore it. "I don't know what's going to happen, Tom," she said after a pause. "I don't know if we'll ever be able to move past this. But I also can't keep carrying this weight on my own." Tom listened, his heart aching at the vulnerability in her voice. He knew she wasn't asking for a solution, and he wasn't going to offer one. He knew that time was the only thing that could help, and even then, he wasn't sure if that would be enough. "I understand," he said softly. "And if you ever need space or time, I'll give it to you. I'll respect whatever you need." For the first time in a long while, Sarah felt like she was in control of her own emotions. It wasn't about forgiveness, and it wasn't about healing instantly. It was about taking that first step towards something unknown. "I don't know what the future holds," she said. quietly. But maybe, just maybe, we can start to rebuild some kind of trust. Maybe we can find a way to move forward, even if that's just as strangers. I don't know what that looks like, but I'm willing to find out. Tom smiled faintly, the first real smile he had given in a long time. It wasn't full of joy, but it was a sign of hope. I'll take that, Sarah, he said softly. I'll take whatever you're willing to give. And in that moment, with the weight of the past still hanging in the air, both of them knew that the road ahead would be long and uncertain. But they also knew that, for the first time in a long while, they were willing to try. They were willing to see where it would take them. The days after their meeting in the cafe passed slowly, each one carrying a weight that neither Sarah nor Tom could ignore. They had spoken, they had opened up, but that was only the beginning of a much longer and more difficult journey. Sarah continued with her life, but everything felt different. The air felt thicker, the silence between her and Tom felt heavier. She had taken the first step toward trying to move forward, but she didn't know how. There were moments when she felt a flicker of hope, a spark that maybe they could find a way back to something, even if it wasn't the same. But then there were the other moments, the ones filled with doubt, the ones where she wondered if it was all too late. The truth was, she didn't know what to do with all the emotions swirling inside her. On one hand, there was the love she once had for him, and on the other, the pain of betrayal that still clung to her like a second skin. It wasn't something that could just be brushed away. Tom, too, struggled with his own demons. Every day without Sarah was a reminder of what he had lost, and the guilt never seemed to fade. He had always believed that time would heal everything, that distance would give them both the space to move on. But now, he wasn't so sure. The hurt was too deep, and the scars were too fresh. He had to live with the consequences of his actions, and no amount of time or apologies could undo the damage he had caused. And yet he held on to that small hope, the hope that somehow they could rebuild. It wasn't about forgetting what had happened, it wasn't about pretending everything was okay. It was about acknowledging the past, facing it head-on, and seeing if there was any way to create something new from the broken pieces. One evening, Sarah decided to reach out again. She had spent the past few weeks reflecting, and while the pain was still there, something inside her told her that she wasn't ready to give up on the possibility of moving forward. She wasn't asking for perfection, and she wasn't asking for everything to be fixed overnight. But she wanted to take another step, however small, toward finding some kind of peace. She texted Tom. "Can we meet again? I think I'm ready to talk." She wasn't sure what the outcome would be, but she knew she needed to face this head-on. Tom's reply came quickly. "Of course, I'll be there." It wasn't much, but to Sarah it was enough. She didn't need grand gestures, just the willingness to try again. They agreed to meet at the same cafe where everything had started. When Sarah arrived, Tom was already there, waiting by the window, just like before. This time, however, there was no tension, no walls between them. There was a quiet understanding that they were both here, in this moment, to figure out what came next. "I've been thinking a lot," Sarah said as she sat down across from him. "And I realize that I don't have all the answers. I don't know if I can forgive you right now, and I don't know what the future holds for us. But I'm willing to try again. I'm willing to see where this goes." Tom nodded, his heart swelling with a mixture of hope and fear. "I don't expect you to forgive me today or even tomorrow," he said softly. "I just want you to know that I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. I'll do whatever it takes to show you that I can be the man you deserve." The words hung in the air, not as promises but as a quiet understanding between them. They didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, they were both willing to find out together. Neither of them had the answers, but they were ready to walk the uncertain path ahead, one step at a time. The weeks that followed their last meeting were filled with small, tentative steps. Sarah and Tom were no longer strangers to each other, but they weren't exactly close again either. They had crossed a line together, one that neither of them had expected to cross. But they had done it, and now, there was no turning back. Sarah continued with her life, but now, there was a space in it that wasn't there before. She would run into Tom occasionally, at the grocery store or passing by on the street, and each time, it felt like a reminder of everything they had been through. At first, these encounters felt awkward, even painful. The memories of the past were still fresh, lingering in the background like a shadow. But with time, something started to shift. The awkwardness began to fade, and instead of feeling tense around him, Sarah found herself able to greet him with a small smile. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was progress. She realized that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to carry the weight of the past forever. Tom, on the other hand, found himself waiting for something he wasn't sure would ever come: forgiveness. He didn't ask for it, not yet, but he hoped for it. Every time they saw each other, he felt a small flicker of hope. It was painful, but he welcomed the pain. It meant he was still trying, still hoping, that somehow they could find their way back to each other. One day, out of the blue, Sarah texted him. The message was simple. "Can we talk?" It was a small step, but it was a step. Tom didn't hesitate. He replied almost immediately. "Of course, when and where?" They agreed to meet at a local park, somewhere neutral and quiet, a place where they could talk without the pressure of being in a public space. When they met, it was like something had shifted between them. There was no tension, no weight to the silence. It felt like two people who were finally ready to face the past without letting it define them. Sarah looked at Tom, her expression thoughtful. "I've been thinking a lot," she said quietly. "And I realized something. I don't have all the answers, and I don't know if I ever will. But I'm not carrying this burden anymore. I can't. It's too heavy." Tom's heart skipped a beat. He had never expected to hear those words from her. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was freedom. The freedom to move forward. "I'm glad to hear you say that," he said softly. "I'm still here, Sarah. I'm still here, willing to work through whatever comes next. I'm not asking for anything from you right now. I just want to keep moving forward, even if it's just one step at a time." Sarah nodded, her gaze softening. "I don't know where this will lead, Tom," she said. "But I'm willing to find out. I'm willing to take those small steps too." And with that, something changed between them. The past wasn't gone, and it never would be. But it no longer held them captive. They were finally learning to let go of the hurt, and take each moment as it came. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was a beginning. And for the first time in a long while, they both felt like they were moving forward, not together just yet, but on their own terms. The journey ahead was still uncertain, but it was theirs to navigate, one step at a time. As the weeks passed, Sarah and Tom found themselves gradually creating a new rhythm in their lives. It was not perfect, but it was real. They continued to meet occasionally, but each encounter felt like another step towards something that neither of them could fully predict. The silence between them, once filled with tension and unspoken words, had started to shift into something more comfortable. There was still an underlying sadness, but it no longer defined their every interaction. They began talking more openly, not just about the past, but about the present. Sarah shared moments of her life that didn't involve Tom, her work, her friends, the things she was learning about herself as she healed. Tom listened, genuinely interested in her words. He had never stopped caring for her, but now, there was an understanding that things were different. He wasn't trying to fix everything. He wasn't expecting things to go back to how they were. He was simply there, willing to support her, whatever that looked like. One afternoon, after a long conversation about their separate journeys, Sarah looked at Tom, a soft but sincere smile on her face. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "I've spent so much time looking back, but I think it's time to start looking forward. I don't know what the future holds, but I think I'm ready to let go of the weight I've been carrying." Tom nodded, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "I'm proud of you," he said. "I know it hasn't been easy. It hasn't been easy for either of us. But I'm glad you're finally finding peace." Sarah's heart swelled with a mix of gratitude and relief. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she was moving towards something. She wasn't sure if it would lead to forgiveness, to reconciliation, or if it would just lead to her own personal peace. But that was okay. The important thing was that she was no longer stuck. I don't know what's next, Sarah said, her voice quieter now, as if she was speaking a thought she had just realized. But I think I'm ready for whatever it is. Tom's eyes softened as he looked at her. Whatever it is, he echoed. I'll be here, Sarah. I've always been here, and I'll continue to be. There was no rush, no pressure, just a quiet understanding that whatever path they were on, they were taking it in their own time, on their own terms. As the sun set that evening, casting a warm glow over the park where they sat, it felt like a moment of new beginnings. Not an ending, not a conclusion to their story, but a chapter where they could finally start writing something new, something for themselves. The past would always be a part of them, but it no longer controlled them. The future was unknown, but for the first time in a long time, they were both open to finding out where it would take them. The journey was far from over, but Sarah and Tom were no longer afraid to take the next step. Together, apart, or somewhere in between, they were both learning that healing, forgiveness, and peace didn't come in perfect packages. They came in moments, in small decisions, in the willingness to keep moving forward, no matter how uncertain the path ahead seemed.